Hi everyone, this is Dan, and this is the Mighty Thor, number 341 by Walter Simonson, art and story. And yeah, dude, I didn't realize that Walter Simonson did everything in Thor. So very, very interesting issue. So, quick background story. This is part of my series, Path to Secret Wars. This is the last Thor issue of the Mighty Thor before Thor gets sucked into Secret Wars. Though you'll see that that event happens rather abruptly in this issue, which is kind of interesting. And so my background with Thor, my dad grew up reading Thor, the Marvel Thor, and he actually really, really liked the Thor with the alter ego. Right, he's just the humble, I believe like man. I think it's Donald Blake, and then he transforms into the Mighty Thor, and he always loved that version of Thor the most. He's actually not really fond of the movie Thor, and I never realized that there was a type of Thor that transformed until I think I read Avengers Annual number 10, which was pretty interesting. This Thor is very fascinating. So we open up, we get a nice splash page. Here's Thor kind of flying around on his Hama. And we got the Empire State Building in the background. Nice little skyline. Great narration and writing. Thor has returned to New York City. Here you get some some punk rockers. This is definitely an '80s comic, kind of accosting him and talking about him shaving his hair. He kind of jests back. And he walks into a door and freaking gets transported. And then you don't hear anything about it like for the rest of it. So really fascinating. It just freaking jumps him into Secret Wars in the first two pages. I wonder if Walter Simonson was probably like, you know what, Jim, screw your Secret Wars. I'm just gonna give you 2 pages and I'm gonna write whatever the hell I want to do from here on out. So here this is Laura Lay, Enchantress, I believe, and she's been transported. She's on a mission by Loki in the human world, Midgard, right? She gets accosted by a bunch of punks in the subway, and she uses her powers to get them to basically beat each other up while she continues on her mission. She's going deep into the subways, and she discovers this great dragon deep in there. And she attempts to seduce this dragon, but the dragon ends up seducing her. Ha! Plot twist. We go to Thor, and Thor is coming back to. So he's gone to the headquarters of Shield. He's meeting up with Nick Fury, non-race bended Nick Fury of the '80s and the '90s, and very interesting. So they go off, they have a conversation, and what Thor is basically telling him is, "Hey, I can no longer transform into Donald Blake. I'm now only Thor, and that's all I will ever be. But now I don't have a secret identity." And I need some kind of cover so that I can live, while I'm here on Midgard, I can kind of blend into the crowds. So they make him dress up in a regular suit, and Nick Fury's kind of like, okay, yeah, this isn't gonna work. You still look like Thor, even with jeans and a shirt on. And so he gives him, this is great, like these old Marvel comics. So Marvel and DC have always had a long rivalry of friendly rivalry. But this is kind of a friendly little jab at DC. They give Thor a pair of glasses, and he puts them on, and Nick Fury kind of jests that, hey, it works for the other guy. Why can't it work for you? So he goes over, and when he's leaving the room, he bumps into a guy with black hair and a suit and glasses, and it's pretty hilarious. And his companion says, "Let's go, Clark. We're going to be late for a conference." And I love how Walter Simonson basically draws Clark Kent. It's freaking great, dude. It's all in good fun. And I think in this era, this was before Joe Quesada, so the relationship between Marvel and DC was a lot more civil back then. So you get a nice little introduction here. Here's this, I believe this is Odin, and he's, summoning up these ravens to send out a message through the universe. Meanwhile, Thor's got to go find a real job in the real world. It's actually not a bad and kind of an interesting plot. Again, this is he's lost his ability to be Donald Blake, which I'm guessing is his like human life, right? Kind of secret identity transformation guy. I don't know. I don't really read Thor, so I'm kind of jumping to this raw. Luckily, Walter Simonson does a pretty good job of kind of introducing the premise pretty well, so I don't feel like I'm missing anything other than characters like Lorelei. I know that from just other issues that's Enchantress, and some of the other characters aren't introduced nearly as well, and I think that's kind of, I would say, a slight critique on this is I think Walter Simonson should have probably listened to Jim Shooter a little bit and add a little more narration to explain what's going on. But still, overall, a good and interesting story, so I'll stick with it. He goes to get a job, and now he's taken on the name Jarlson Sigurd. And suddenly, he goes out to see a construction tower with a girl hanging from it. And he goes up to save her, only to find out it's a trap. And this is the Enchantress who has been mesmerized by this dragon, who is Fafnir, I think his name is. And it's pretty interesting. Thor has actually fought this dragon before in the past, and it's a great battle between the two when he won. We get some more side things going on, some side plots. In this case, it looks like somebody's summoning the Dark Elf. And Thor gets into a fight. He gets actually buried by the dragon. The dragon already knows that's Thor. And he comes out swinging, transformed into his true self, gets out Mjolnir and starts beating the shit out of this dragon. Strangely enough, he kind of actually finds out that this dragon's actually invulnerable to the hammer. So he has to be very tricky about how he's going to fight him. By the way, this is great right here. You don't usually see battles last this many pages in American comics, so it's great action poses and dynamic shots by Walter Simonson. Here you jump over, this is Volstagg, and he's looking for Balder. Balder is kind of, I'm guessing, leaving Asgard because he's got some sort of problem. Balder looks like freaking a Japanese character with that white hair. And then you get a little, this is kind of subplot action. It's kind of interesting. It looks like Balder had some sort of problem when he returned from Hela's domain. And this lady, this freaking thought, Carnilla, is out to freaking steal his soul, which is kind of a nice, interesting subplot. Probably would make a lot more sense for people who were following Thor at this time. We get back to the fight, and yeah, Thor and the dragon are just going at each other. Eventually, he starts to really overpower the dragon with his lightning power, and the dragon ends up freaking bouncing out and escaping through the subway and the water tunnels. Thor ends up having to let him go. And you get the realization that Thor reveals that his hammer wasn't really affecting the dragon. By the way, this is the panel I chose to draw. Again, I make these things freaking Titanic. I actually, the first time I drew this, I was pissed off. And you know what? I'll go over it later. Let me just finish this real quick. So we go to Loki, and Loki's watching the whole thing and relishing in this all. He realizes now that if he can manipulate Fafnir the dragon, he can destroy Thor. And at the same time, he's kind of using Lorelei and kind of messing with them. You get a nice little ending scene where, the Enchantress is kind of playing dumb right here because Thor doesn't realize this is the Enchantress. And she's just kind of cuddling up next to him. Yeah, that's one interesting thing that I've noticed is like a lot of the old subplots between the Enchantress and the Thor is just Enchantress trying to get into Thor's pants. Which isn't a bad subplot, but it's kind of like, Thor, right, for the most part in the old days. So how did I do? Let's go back to that art, shall we? So really interesting. In the beginning, I didn't like this because what I've noticed when I do this art for my series books, and by the way, I think I'm going to continue to do this just because it's so much fun to try to draw what the artist, a panel from the artwork, and then it helps me kind of appreciate the level of effort that went into the art by doing it myself and seeing what it would take to draw this kind of stuff. And when I drew this the first time, I was actually kind of annoyed because what I did subconsciously is I made the face taller subconsciously, and I moved the eyes and I moved the nose. And I do this so many freaking times, and I always change the shot. It's never the exact same angle when I do these things, but what I kind of realized is that I'm getting to this point where like I kind of realize I make a mistake in the shot angle or the scale, and I just kind of make up for it. And I ended up, even though I changed his expression slightly and his nose, it still ends up looking pretty damn good. And so I've come to like, I actually kind of, probably of all the art that I've done, I actually kind of like this a lot. Definitely not perfect. I kind of goofed around with his robe right here that looks like veins instead of rolls. But I ended up not doing too bad right here. I kind of like it. Anyhow, yep, that's the review. That's Mighty Thor 341. Let me know what you think. If you liked this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. If you got a comment on the Mighty Thor 341 or old Thor, Walter Simonson Thor comics in general, leave them down below. And or about this art piece I did. And I will see you next time.